I've been driving long haul for 15 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything the road had to offer. Dead animals, drunk drivers, weather that could peel paint off a barn. You name it, I've dealt with it. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on Route 50 through Nevada last October. It was around 2 in the morning, that dead hour when even the truck stops seemed to hold their breath. I was hauling refrigerated goods from Sacramento to St. Louis, running behind schedule because of a blown tire outside Reno. The desert stretched out on both sides of me, dark and empty under a moonless sky. My headlights carved a tunnel through the blackness, and the white lines on the road hypnotized me into that semi-conscious state we truckers call highway hypnosis. That's when I saw her. She stood on the shoulder, about 50 yards ahead, wearing what looked like a white dress that seemed to glow in my headlights. One arm was raised, thumb out. Now, I don't normally pick up hitchhikers. Company policy and common sense both say no. But something about her made me ease off the throttle. Maybe it was because she was a woman alone in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it was because I was tired and my judgment was shot. Hell, maybe it was something else entirely. I pulled the rig to a stop, air brakes hissing, and leaned over to crack open the passenger door. "You all right, miss?" I called out. She stepped into the light spilling from the cab, and I got my first good look at her. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with long dark hair that hung past her shoulders. Her dress was simple, almost old-fashioned, like something from the 50s. But it was her eyes that caught me. Dark and deep, with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not scared, not grateful, just watching. "Thank you," she said quietly, climbing into the cab. Her voice had a strange quality to it, like an echo in an empty room. "I've been waiting." "Waiting long? There's nothing out here for miles. No gas stations, no towns. What happened to your car?" "I don't remember," she said, settling into the seat. She didn't buckle up, just sat there with her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. "How far are you going?" "All the way to St. Louis, but I can drop you at the next town with a phone. That'd be Ely, about 40 miles up." She nodded, but didn't say anything else. The cab fell silent, except for the rumble of the engine and the hum of the tires on asphalt. I tried to make conversation a few times, asked her name, where she was from, the usual small talk, but her answers were vague and distant. Eventually, I gave up and focused on the road. That's when things started getting weird. At first, it was subtle. The temperature in the cab seemed to drop, even though the heater was cranked up. I could see my breath misting in front of me. I glanced at the dashboard, thinking the AC had somehow kicked on, but all the controls were right where I'd left them. "You cold?" I asked my passenger. She didn't answer. She was still staring straight ahead, but now I noticed her lips were moving, like she was whispering something I couldn't hear. "Miss, you all right?" Her head turned toward me, moving in this slow, mechanical way that made my skin crawl. Her eyes locked on mine, and that's when I saw it. Her pupils were completely white, like cataracts, but glowing faintly in the darkness. "We're almost there," she whispered. "Almost where? Ely's still 30 miles out." "Not Ely," she said, and her voice had changed. It was deeper now, layered, like multiple people speaking at once. "The place where I died." My blood turned to ice. I wanted to pull over, to tell her to get out, but my hands wouldn't move from the wheel. It was like I was frozen, trapped in my own body, while my foot kept the accelerator pressed down. The highway ahead began to change. The asphalt looked wrong, darker, wet. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the headlights, but as we drove on, I realized the road was covered in something red. Blood. The highway was covered in blood. "What the hell?" I started, but she cut me off. "Right here," she said, pointing ahead. In the middle of the road, illuminated by my headlights, I saw the wreckage. A car crumpled and twisted, its white paint streaked with rust and gore. The driver's side was caved in completely, and through the shattered windshield, I could see a body slumped over the steering wheel. The body was wearing a white dress. I slammed on the brakes, and the truck shuddered to a stop just feet from the wreck. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. I turned to look at my passenger, but the seat was empty. She was gone, just vanished. But I could still smell her, that faint, sickly sweet scent that I know only now realized had been in the cab since she'd climbed in. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to process what I'd just seen. Finally, I forced myself to get out and check the road ahead. My legs were shaking so bad I could barely stand. There was nothing there. No wreckage, no blood, just empty highways stretching into the darkness. I checked my GPS, my phone, anything to orient myself, to prove I wasn't losing my mind. According to the map, there was nothing on this stretch of road. No accidents reported, no landmarks. I got back in the truck and drove. I didn't stop until I reached Ely, and when I did, I went straight to the all-night diner and ordered the strongest coffee they had. The waitress must have seen something in my face because she asked if I was all right. Just tired, I lied. Before I left, I asked her about Route 50, about accidents, about ghost stories. She got this look on her face, like she'd been waiting for someone to ask. "You saw her, didn't you?" she said quietly. "The girl in the white dress." Turns out, I wasn't the first. Back in 1959, a young woman named Catherine Mills was driving home from Reno when she lost control of her car on that exact stretch of road. Died instantly. Since then, truckers and late-night drivers have reported seeing her, picking her up, only for her to disappear when they reached the spot where she died. I finished my coffee, thanked the waitress, and got back on the road. I've driven Route 50 a dozen times since then. Always during the day, never at night. And I never, ever pick up hitchhikers anymore. But sometimes when I'm driving through that stretch of Nevada desert, I still see her in my mirrors, standing on the shoulder in her white dress, thumb out, waiting for the next driver who'll stop. This happened about 3 years ago during a run from Atlanta to Chicago. I'd been driving for close to 10 hours straight, and my eyes felt like someone had rubbed sandpaper over them. The regulations say you're supposed to log your hours, take breaks, all that safety stuff, but when you're behind schedule and the dispatcher is breathing down your neck, sometimes you push it a little further than you should. It was just past midnight when I saw the sign. Eddie's Truck Stop, 2 miles, hot food, fuel, rest. Thank God, I thought. I'd been watching my fuel gauge creep toward empty for the last hour, trying to make it to the next major stop, but this was perfect. A little off-brand place, sure, but beggars can't choosers at midnight on a Tuesday. The exit came up, one of those lonely ramps that curved off into darkness. No lights except for my headlights, and another small sign pointing the way. Eddie's, 1 mile. The road was narrow, barely 2 lanes, cracked and potholed like it hadn't seen maintenance in years. Trees pressed in on both sides, their branches creating a tunnel that my headlights barely penetrated. I almost turned back. Something about it felt wrong, too isolated, too quiet. But my fuel light was glowing red, and I was exhausted enough that I would have stopped at a shack if it had diesel and coffee. The truck stop appeared suddenly, like it had materialized out of the darkness. It was bigger than I expected, a main building with a diner, a fuel island with 4 pumps, and a small lot with about a dozen parking spots. But here's what made my spine tingle. There were no other vehicles. Not one. No cars, no trucks, nothing. Just empty parking spaces under flickering fluorescent lights. I pulled up to the fuel island and shut down the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. No highway noise, no insects, nothing. Just the tick-tick-tick of my cooling engine. The place looked stuck in time, like it had been built in the 70s and never updated. The fuel pumps were ancient with analog displays and hand-crank nozzles. The main building's windows glowed with a yellow, sickly light that seemed to pulse slightly, though that might have been my tired eyes playing tricks. I climbed down from the cab, and my boots hit the pavement with an echo that seemed too loud, too sharp. The air smelled wrong. Not bad exactly, but off, like meat that's just started to turn. The pump wouldn't take my credit card. The card reader was there, but it was so old and weathered that I couldn't even tell what kind of cards it accepted. A handwritten sign taped to the pump read, "Pay inside." Great. I looked at the diner. Through the windows, I could see someone moving around inside. Looked like a waitress from the uniform. At least the place was actually open. The glass door stuck when I tried to push it, then gave way with a pneumatic hiss that sounded almost like a sigh. A bell jingled overhead, harsh in the quiet. "Be right with you, honey," called a woman's voice from somewhere in back. The interior was just as time-locked as the exterior. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with spinning stools, a jukebox in the corner that was definitely not playing anything. The walls were covered with faded pictures, truckers and their rigs mostly, dating back decades. Some of them looked really old, like from the 40s or 50s. That's when I noticed something odd. In every picture, if you looked closely, you could see the same truck stop in the background. This truck stop, Eddie's. But the trucks changed, the fashion changed, even the trees outside looked different heights. It was like a timeline of the place, except... "What can I get you, sweetheart?" I jumped. The waitress had appeared behind the counter without me hearing her approach. She was older, maybe 60, with platinum blonde hair piled high on her head and makeup applied with a generous hand. Her name tag said Dolores. I need to fuel up, pump 4, and maybe some coffee if it's fresh." "Coffee's always fresh here," she said, pouring me a cup. "You look tired, honey. Long haul?" "Atlanta to Chicago. I'm behind schedule." "Aren't we all?" she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "That'll be $65 for the fuel." I hadn't told her how much I'd pumped, hadn't even pumped it yet. "I haven't filled up." "Oh, you will," she said, still smiling. "You'll fill right up. $65. Something in her tone made me not want to argue. I pulled out my wallet and handed her 3 20s and a 5. She took the money, and I noticed her fingers. They were cold when they brushed mine, and the skin looked waxy, almost translucent. "You got a restroom?" I asked. "Down the hall, last door on the left. But honey, don't go into any of the other rooms. Those are private." I nodded, took my coffee, and headed for the bathroom. The hallway was dim, lit by a single bare bulb that swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. There were 3 doors on each side, all closed. As I passed the first one, I heard something from inside, a sound like machinery running, or maybe breathing. Deep, rhythmic, mechanical breathing. I walked faster. The bathroom was surprisingly clean, almost pristine, with white tile that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. I splashed water on my face, trying to shake off the weird vibe this place was giving me. In the mirror, I looked pale, my eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. I looked like hell. That's when I noticed the writing on the wall, scratched into the paint beside the mirror, barely visible. "Don't eat the food. Don't stay. Get out." Below it, in different handwriting, "Eddie's not Eddie anymore." And below that, "They're all still here." My hands started shaking. I dried them on a paper towel and stepped back into the hallway. The door to my right, one of the doors Dolores told me not to open, was slightly ajar now. I was certain it had been closed when I passed it. I should have left, should have run straight back to my truck and gotten the hell out of there. But curiosity, or stupidity, or maybe just exhaustion, made me stop, made me look through that crack in the door. The room beyond was dark, but I could make out shapes. Tables, I thought at first. Then my eyes adjusted, and I realized they weren't tables, they were trucks. Full-size 18-wheelers parked in rows inside a space that shouldn't have been able to fit them. And the trucks were old. Some of them looked like they were from the 50s, the 60s, earlier. Rusted, covered in dust, like they'd been sitting there for decades. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I could see figures in the cabs, drivers slumped over their steering wheels, completely still, waiting. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering. I turned and nearly ran back to my truck. Dolores was right where I'd left her, still smiling. "All done?" she asked pleasantly. "I need to go. I need to leave right now." "But you haven't filled up yet," she said, and her smile widened, showing too many teeth. "And you're so tired, honey. Why don't you just stay for a bit? Rest. Have some pie. We have lots of drivers here. You could join them." "No," I said, backing toward the door. "I'm leaving." "That's what they all say," she said, and her voice had changed, become deeper, layered with something that sounded like grinding gears. "But Eddie needs drivers, always needs more drivers, and you're so tired, too tired to drive safely. Why don't you just rest here, forever?" I bolted, shoved through the door, and ran for my truck, fumbling for my keys. Behind me, I heard the diner door open, heard Dolores's voice calling after me, but I didn't look back. I got the engine started and threw the truck into gear. As I pulled away from the fuel island, I glanced in my side mirror. Dolores stood in the doorway, still smiling, and behind her, I could see shapes emerging from the diner. People, or things that looked like people, drivers in outdated clothes, moving slowly, mechanically, toward the parking lot. I hit the access road at 50, way too fast for the narrow lane, but I didn't care. I needed to get back to the highway, back to civilization, back to somewhere that made sense. The trees flew past in a blur. The road seemed to stretch on forever, much longer than the 1 mile I'd driven in. My fuel gauge showed empty. I hadn't gotten any fuel after all, but the engine kept running, kept pushing me forward. Finally, I saw it, the highway, with its beautiful streetlights and normal traffic. I merged on without slowing down and didn't stop until I reached a proper truck stop 20 miles up the road. A Flying J, brightly lit and busy, with dozens of trucks in the lot and normal people walking around. I filled up there, went inside and bought about 6 cups of coffee and a sandwich I was too shaken to eat. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called dispatch and told them I was taking my mandatory rest period, 10 hours, no arguments. Later, after I'd slept in the cab and my nerves had settled, I tried to find Eddie's truck stop on my GPS, on Google Maps, on every trucker app I had. Nothing. No exits marked on that stretch of highway, no businesses listed in the area. I even called the highway patrol and asked if they knew about any truck stops in that area. "Not on that route," the officer told me. "Nothing but trees for 30 miles in either direction." I drove that route again, months later, in broad daylight, forced myself to do it, to prove I hadn't imagined the whole thing. I found the exit, or at least I found where the exit should have been. There was nothing there but trees and an old faded sign lying in the weeds, labeled Eddie's Truck Stop. Someone had spray painted over it in red, closed 1982. I've talked to other drivers since then, carefully, not wanting to sound crazy. A few of them have mentioned seeing strange truck stops late at night, places that don't show up on maps, places that feel wrong. Most of them had the sense to keep driving. I wasn't that smart, but I got lucky. And now I make damn sure I fuel up before it gets dark. And I never, ever stop at any place I haven't verified on 3 different GPS systems. Because out there, on the lonely roads in the middle of the night, there are places that aren't quite right. Places that are hungry for drivers who are too tired, too desperate, or too curious. Eddie's is still out there, I'm sure of it. Still waiting, still collecting. Just don't stop there. And if you see Dolores, drive faster.